In today's video, I'm going to cover arrow shaft selection, so how to pick the correct arrow spine for your particular setup. So oftentimes there are a lot of questions regarding which arrow spine to choose for your particular setup. Now there is confusion on how to select the proper arrow spine because there is a difference between draw length and arrow length. And also there is a difference between shooting compound and recurve as far as which arrow spines you do need. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to correctly select the proper arrow spine for your individual setup.
You're watching the Kaminski YouTube channel.
If you're new here, my name is Kaminski. I'm a two-time Olympic silver medalist in the sport of archery. I'm working to make this channel a great resource to all types of archery, from form to tuning, strength training, training for the sport, lots of different videos. So if you haven't by now, hit that subscription button and the notification bell, so that way you're notified every time I do upload a new video, which is quite often these days. And I'm uploading a lot of different types of content, and you ultimately don't want to miss out. You know, I'm just really trying to make this easier learning archery. You know, when I was growing up, none of this information was out there, and ultimately it took a very long time to learn a lot of important information. So there are a few things that you need to know in order to correctly select the proper arrow spine for your individual setup. One of those is your draw length, and you need a bow scale. Now, this is an X-Spot branded bow scale. You really don't need a special one. This is actually just a cheap basically a luggage scale that they stuck their logo on and charged more for it. So I will put a link in the description below where you can get a basic cheap luggage scale in case you don't have one yet. Disclaimer, that is an Amazon affiliate link, so if you do click that link and you purchase it, or purchase anything within 24 hours for that matter, so if you're doing your normal Amazon shopping, I do get a percentage of that because I'm an Amazon affiliate. And ultimately, you help this channel produce more content for free for everyone. So thank you to everyone who clicks on those links. So I already covered that you need your draw weight. Now, really quick to note, your draw weight is not the same as what your limbs say. Your limbs are marked with a specific weight, and that is at a specific draw length. Now, if you have a draw length different than what those limbs were measured at, they're not going to be exactly what they say on the limbs. For example, the limbs that I shoot are a 42-pound set of limbs, and when I pull the bow back, depending on how I adjust my limb bolts, I can have anywhere from 42 to 48 pounds. So quite a big range, quite a big difference, and so it's really important to know the exact holding weight that you have while at full draw. Now, the next thing that you really absolutely need to know is your arrow length. Now remember, I said it was different than your draw length. Your draw length is measured from your nock to the front of your riser plus an inch and a half, somewhere in that range while at full draw, but that doesn't always mean your arrows will be that same exact length. Now, this is important to note, especially if you are a younger archer or potentially somebody who is going to be shooting longer arrows. So an arrow that is in front of your riser, you know, you're using an extended clicker on the end of your sight bar or something along those lines. You really need to make sure you plan for your proper arrow length or the arrow length you will be using. So arrow length is defined by the measurement from the groove of the nock, so where the string sits up against, to the end of the shaft. This arrow does not even have a point in it, but it's a good illustration to show you it's from the groove of the nock to the end of the shaft. It is not to the end of the point. That is because the point does not flex. When the arrow is flexing, that has everything to do with how stiff of an arrow you do need. A quick little side bit of information, this arrow right here is a 450. And what does 450 mean? 450 means that on a span of 28 inches, so 2 points 28 inches apart, if you hang a 2-pound weight in the middle, it deflects 450 thousandths of an inch. So a 300 spine arrow would only deflect 300 thousandths of an inch, and a 1,000 spine arrow would deflect exactly 1 inch under 2 pounds of force. So that means that the higher numbers means the arrows are weaker. They will bend easier. You need those for lower draw weights. A stiffer arrow you need for higher draw weights. So a quick thing to note while measuring your draw weight with a recurve, if you are using a clicker, you want to make sure you are pulling the bow back with the bow scale until the clicker clicks. Then you let down and read the maximum reading on the bow scale. If you are using a bare bow or something that does not have a clicker, you can essentially pull back your arrow, pull back your bow with an arrow in it, have somebody mark the shaft, and then pull back the scale until that mark is in the same location on the bow, and that way it's consistent and you know your exact draw weight. And the last thing that you do need to know is which arrows you're going to be using. This is an arrow selection chart. This one is from Easton. Now, all other arrow manufacturers will have their own selection charts. However, you really need to be careful and make note that if it does not have a recurve bow chart, on this side there's compound, on this side there is recurve. If it doesn't have recurve listed, do not use that arrow chart. I would suggest using another manufacturer that does have a recurve suggestion, because recurve bows need different spined arrows than compound bows. And it really just has to do with how much and when the exertion of energy onto the arrow occurs as through the draw cycle, and that really changes the way the arrow flexes. But we're not going to get into that right now. We're really just going to cover the basics on how to select the proper arrow spines. Now, there are programs out there such as Archer's Advantage that will allow you to choose arrow spines based on every single factor, and I can tell you that that's just a waste of time. It's really not needed. It's more confusing than not. You know, it raises a level of stress and importance into things that really aren't important. How long your arrow is and how many pounds you're shooting at full draw is really all you need to know. That's it, because it works. And oftentimes people will use these charts incorrectly, and that's when they get into trouble. So I would just stick with a chart. It's much simpler that way. Okay, so this is a close-up view of the arrow selection chart. Again, this is an Easton arrow selection chart. Excuse the shadows here. My camera lights are starting to go dim. I need to replace the batteries. But anyway, so this is pretty simple. Over here you can see it says recurve bow. Over there it says compound bow. Your arrow length. So that's why I said you need your arrow length. It doesn't say your draw length, arrow length. So make sure you have your arrow length and your recurve bow. And now what you're going to do is you'll see these are your arrow lengths going up this direction, and this starts at a low draw weight and goes up. I'll zoom in closer here in a second so you can see it. But essentially, you know, you can see a 28-inch arrow at a certain draw length recommends a T7, and then you look through all of these charts and you find T7 and then which arrow it recommends and which spine it recommends, and that's how you select your arrows. Okay, so now we're up close and you can see that this is the recurve side. Here's your arrow lengths and your bow weight, which should be draw weight, obviously, as I mentioned. So for example, my arrows are 29.5 inches. So we're gonna go toward between the 29 and 30 inch spectrum just for reference. And my bow weight was over 44 pounds. So we're gonna go to this 44 to 48 pound range, and we'll check that out. So you can see that a 29-inch arrow at 44 pounds needs T8 right here. This is the T8, so T7, T8. And you can see, if I look at X10, what it's recommending, you'll see 450, 500R. Now, 450, 500R, what does R stand for? If you go down here to the Cliff Notes and it says R, the size recommendation for recurve bows. This is how so many people get confused with the ACEs and X10s, which one to properly choose, because they don't look at the R. Now, mostly it's not the shooter's fault. Honestly, it is the shop's fault that is recommending it, because most shops across the United States are compound shops, so they don't know to use this side where it says R. They use this number, and that's where the confusion comes in. And as you can see, the difference between these two on an X10, a 500 versus a 450, that's a big difference. You're not going to get a 450 to tune at this length. Now, I'm in between this one and the next one, which is T9, which is right here, and it's showing me a 450R for X10. Now, what I would do in this situation is I would go with the longer arrow, and with the stiffer spine, cut the arrow slightly longer. I would tune my arrow length to essentially adjust my bow tune, or the way the arrows are flying and flexing, to have the properly spined arrow. So one more thing that I do want to cover before I say that's it is, if you are going to be shooting something that is a very long arrow with a long clicker length, you can get away with a lot more changes. So meaning, if I wanted to shoot a 2315 at 44 pounds, I can reverse engineer this. So if I look for the T selection where a 2315 would be recommended, it is in the T11 group. You can see X7, 2315. So if I want, I'm going to look for a T11 at 44 pounds. And let's give it a look. And 44 pounds. So the 44 is on this spectrum and this spectrum. So if I shoot a 32-inch 2315, I should be really close to getting that arrow to spine here because it's recommending T11. So you can also reverse engineer which length arrow you are going to need based on the draw weight you are shooting and the desired arrow you want to shoot, you know? So that's specific for indoor shooting, not necessarily ideal for outdoor shooting because you do want not to have too much of an arrow, too excessive length of an arrow out there than you actually need to, especially if you're having trouble reaching farther distances. Okay, so as you can see, it's really not that complicated on how to select the proper arrow spine. It's really that simple. Now, all of those arrow spines are recommended to work with their standard components. So nothing, no custom weight points, no custom length points, that type of thing. So you do have a bit of adjustment there that you can, you know, shoot a lighter point, a heavier point to make other arrows work for you or not. So again, it's really actually very simple. It's not all that complicated. You don't need Archer's Advantage. All you really need is an arrow chart, but you do need to make sure you are selecting from the R selection, the R recommendation, because that means recurve. Super important, especially when you're going to be buying X10s, which are, you know, what, probably $400 a dozen now. So you got to make sure you're buying the right arrows the first time.
Thanks for watching, and thank you to my Patreon supporters. If you want to become a Patreon supporter or check out books, apparel, and some seminar info, head to jkaminski.com, and be sure to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell to be notified every time a new video is uploaded. And I appreciate you watching. Thank you again.